Knock, knock, real estate pros. You could save up to 30% when you file your taxes with Block Advisors instead of a typical accountant. Block Advisors by H&R Block provides affordable tax expertise that finds every credit and deduction you deserve. 100% accuracy guaranteed. Visit blockadvisors.com/real estate today to get started. Average savings based on national average fees for federal Form 1040, plus Schedule C and one state filing in the latest available 2020 survey conducted by the National Society of Accountants. Pricing may vary. See blockadvisors.com/guarantees for full details.
If you went on a road trip and you didn't stop for a Big Mac or drop a crispy fry between the car seats or use your McDonald's bag as a placemat, then that wasn't a road trip. It was just a really long drive. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
At participating McDonald's.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of the Penscast. I am your host, Garrett Bahana. As always, alongside me is the fellow contributing writer over at Pensburg.com, co-host of the Penscast and the Penscast mailbag. It is Robbie Noggle. Robbie, we're doing some things a little bit differently tonight as we record this on the evening of June 28th. We are recording live, not live streaming, unfortunately, maybe sometime in the future, but we are recording live as the NHL Draft is taking place. Connor Bedard is a member of the Chicago Blackhawks, and as we wait for the Penguins to pick at number 14 overall, we have some news to talk about. Earlier in the day, Kyle Dubas, president of hockey operations, making his first real mark with the Pittsburgh Penguins as the Penguins acquire Vegas Golden Knights Stanley Cup champion, a Vegas original forward, Reilly Smith, for a 2024 third-round draft pick. A 32-year-old winger who, like I mentioned, spent the last 6 seasons with the Vegas Golden Knights. He's in the second year of a 3-year contract worth $15 million and will have a cap hit of $5 million over the next 2 seasons. He recorded 26 goals, 56 points in 78 games this season. Robbie, we were texting, you and I, back and forth the moment that this news dropped earlier this afternoon. To me and to you and to seemingly everybody else, this seems like this was a move that was made as Kyle Dubas knows the future, and the future may be without Jason Zucker in a black and gold sweater. What were your immediate thoughts on the acquisition of Reilly Smith from the Vegas Golden Knights?
Well, for one, it definitely came as a bit of a shock to me. First, it was kind of a trade that you didn't even really hear much about, and then all of a sudden, boom, Kevin Weeks breaks the news, and that is confirmed pretty much across the hockey world. And the first thought is it goes to Jason Zucker, and it definitely seems like Reilly Smith is the Jason Zucker replacement. And really, if you look at what the projections were for Jason Zucker's next contract, it very well could be that Reilly Smith is the cheaper option, and definitely more than likely the shorter-term option as well. He is 32, but he was a huge part of not only the Golden Knights' success this year on the way to the Cup, but really the Golden Knights' success since their founding. He is an original. He was one of the 6 original Golden Knights members left. He won the Cup this year. He actually scored what ended up being the game-winning goal against the Florida Panthers in Game 5. He is a seasoned veteran. He has plenty of playoff experience, and he does a lot of what Jason Zucker does. He maybe is not as good defensively, but he does not take penalties. He is great on the rush and in transition, exactly what Mike Sullivan wants. And from everything that we kind of saw and read after this trade came out, this seems like a very, very Kyle Dubas kind of move. And Kyle Dubas, again, Vegas was one of those teams that was pressing against the cap. Now, they did turn around and spend that money saved very quickly in signing Ivan Barbashev to a 5-year deal. But to make that deal work, they had to move money out. And they did so with Reilly Smith, and the Penguins were the beneficiary of that at the very low cost of just a 2024 third-round pick. So this is not even a pick they have to worry about next year or this year. So the Penguins will retain their third-round pick for now, at least, in this 2023 draft. It's currently on night one. I think overall, just a very smart move by Kyle Dubas, a move that you expect out of a guy that knows what he wants to do. And it seemed very, very clear that when he had that press conference on Friday, that he knows that there's teams up against the cap that are going to have to be getting rid of a very good player or very good players. And he took advantage of that with the Vegas Golden Knights getting Reilly Smith. And from what we've seen of Reilly Smith, he's not an unknown. He's going to be a 50, 60-point guy. And one of the key factors is he may not be as good as Jason Zucker, but if there's one place where he is maybe an upgrade for sure, it's that he has been healthy outside of a little bit last year when he was sidelined with an injury. He stays on the ice and he produces, and for what the Penguins are looking to do, that's the kind of guy they need.
And again, as you're listening to this, again, we are switching things up here, doing things a little bit differently than we normally do as we continue to monitor the draft almost in real time as we speak this to you on the evening of June 28th, 2023. The St. Louis Blues, I believe the pick is in for the St. Louis Blues, and they have just made it. Again, we are waiting to see what Kyle Dubas will do with the 14th overall pick. But Robbie, going back to continuing to talk about Reilly Smith and the potential impact, you mentioned it. This is a guy that's going to pot you probably anywhere from 20 to 25 goals, 50 to 60 points. That is very much top six production. I think he will slot in very nicely alongside Evgeny Malkin. You mentioned he has the ability to drive play. Looking at some of his advanced metrics, he has a career Corsi for percentage of 56%, a career Fenwick for percentage of 55.6. Those two statistics are not the be-all, end-all, but they can give you a pretty good idea of how well a player is with puck possession. Anything over the 50% threshold means that a player is typically a pretty positive player when it comes to puck possession, handling the puck on his stick, driving it into the offensive zone, and that is what Reilly Smith is. Overall, again, the contract is what it is. You're basically, like you said, Robbie, switching Jason Zucker and what was his cap hit for Reilly Smith, which is a little bit cheaper than what Jason Zucker's cap hit was throughout the 2022-23 season. But you look at where Smith's contract ends, and he has this year and next year, which at 32 years old, it will be an older contract, an older forward on this team. However, Robbie, one of the news nuggets that also was starting to rumble today is that the Penguins are reportedly trying to get younger even as they acquire forward Reilly Smith. Allegedly, the Penguins and Kyle Dubas are looking to shop Jeff Petrie, who was acquired last summer by former general manager Ron Hextall. Robbie, what do you make of this news that the Penguins are looking to get younger on the blue line, potentially looking to flip Jeff Petrie, who in and of himself has a very expensive contract for other teams to possibly take on?
Yeah, I don't think that should really surprise anyone. We discussed it since the season ended that a defenseman is probably going to get moved. Brian Dublin was standing because he's a free agent and likely going to be going anywhere. But of the under contract defensemen, you kind of figured that Jan Ruda, Jeff Petrie, and Marcus Pettersson were going to probably be the three biggest names. I don't think Pettersson, given what he does and what Kyle Dubas wants to do, I don't think Pettersson is at this point, unlike past off seasons, a trade block type candidate. But Jeff Petrie and Jan Ruda both have term left on their contract. But Jeff Petrie, obviously the oldest, it didn't look great in Pittsburgh this year, but I don't chalk that all up to him just having lost that much of a step. I think a part of it was simply that the injuries and the new system, he just never had a chance to fully acclimate. Not to say that he was perfect by any means or he's completely free from fault, but I think if the trade is there, San Jose was the team that was mentioned the most. again, that clears off a massive chunk of salary, and you wouldn't really have to give up in like a Granlund type trade where you probably have to send an asset to get the contract to be taken. I think Petrie would be traded in a hockey trade, one piece for another. And if San Jose is willing to bargain, then I think that's someone you're willing to sit down at the table with and try to make a deal with and kind of maybe get out from under that contract number, because that's a massive, massive number that suddenly becomes very, very useful for the Penguins in search of rebuilding this roster. And Jeff Petrie, getting rid of him does help you get younger at the same time. I mean, he's 35 or 34, 35. He is a right-handed defenseman, which unfortunately does kind of suck, but it is what it is. He is 35. He has 2 years left on a contract that pays him $6.25 million annually against the cap. So imagine what you can do with that space when you're trying to fill out your bottom six. And one of the names coming back was goaltender Kaapo Kähkönen. He's only 26. He has 1 year left on his contract, and he only costs $2.75 million. So definitely something to keep an eye on as we go through these next few days, or even tonight, who knows. But Jeff Petrie is a big name that was kind of floated out there, so it'll be interesting to see what Dubas wants to do with that, if he can get that moved and off the books. We'll recap the beginning of this draft here real quick while we're at it here. So obviously number one, Connor Bedard. Garrett, I can't say that either of us are surprised by that pick.
We had known this ever since the Chicago Blackhawks were fortunate enough to win the draft lottery. Connor Bedard has been a junior phenom and really has been expected to become something of a superstar. He has been given these mega, ultra, high pressure labels, much like Connor McDavid, Sidney Crosby, Alex Ovechkin before him. This is just the latest in a line of prospects coming into the NHL with massive pressure, but also superstar potential. So I can't say I'm thrilled that Connor Bedard is a Chicago Blackhawk, but he is not in the Metropolitan Division, which we will get to momentarily, as some of the better prospects have found their way into the Metropolitan Division. But yes, Connor Bedard is officially a member of the Chicago Blackhawks. Number two, Leo Carlsson, the center, who was playing some wing over in Sweden, but the Ducks get another center to go alongside Trevor Zegras. I wonder, Robbie, if Carlson, but maybe shift him to wing. I don't imagine you're going to. I mean, you could deploy Zegras, Carlson. I think there's another center. They have another young center in there too. Either way, it's another high impact forward for the Anaheim Ducks. It was widely assumed that Bedard was going to go number one, but really in the top five of this draft, there is a lot of star potential. And I mentioned the Metropolitan Division earlier. Pick number three belonged to the Columbus Blue Jackets. They take the Michigan man out of the Big Ten, Adam Fantilli. Robbie, outside of Rick Nash, I'm struggling to really think of like an impact player the Columbus Blue Jackets have had during their franchise history. This is going to be a stud, and I would imagine myself and thousands of other Penguins fans are likely going to be throwing fits for the next 15 years watching a player like Fantilli in Columbus. So a lot of centers have been taken so far in the top 10. But yeah, and I did mention Columbus. I can't stop. I'll give you the mic after I mention the Philadelphia Flyers at number 7 take the highly touted Russian, arguably the second best player in this draft, Matvei Michkov. He has signed a 3-year deal with SKA St. Petersburg, so it may take a couple of years for Michkov to get over to the NHL, a la Kirill Kaprizov did with the Minnesota Wild. But boy, if Michkov does come over and wear that Philadelphia orange, Robbie, it could be even more bad news for the Metropolitan Division and especially the Pittsburgh Penguins. So, Robbie, I'll hand it over to you as we continue to march through the beginning of this first round of the draft. What are some of your thoughts seeing some of these big name prospects taken to some teams that we as Penguin fans don't like to root for.
Yeah, so safe to say there's at least 3 names in these first 8 picks that Penguins fans are gonna want to read up on for the future here. Adam Fantilli being the first, as you mentioned, center from the University of Michigan. They did say on the broadcast he does have the option to go back to Michigan next season and develop more, but that decision has not been made. So if we don't have him in Columbus this year, I would expect him easily to be in Columbus for the 2024-25 season. So great player, had a great World Championships with Team Canada. And yeah, going to be a pain in the butt for Penguins fans for a long time. But Penguins fans, I guess we can't complain too much given all the draft luck we've had in the past. So, I mean, yeah, it sucks on being on the other side of it, but such is life, I guess, when it comes to like this. San Jose Sharks, just because I thought this was funny, they drafted a center off the U.S. under 18 team, the national development team. His name is Will Smith, and he actually walked up on stage with the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air playing in as his walk-up song. So, and he kind of said in his post-draft interview that he definitely did it on purpose, and he even sung the song on ESPN's broadcast. So good sport there. After that, though, Matvei Michkov, I really thought Arizona might take it and spoil that. Actually, I thought Montreal might spoil it, and they kind of went a completely different direction with a defenseman out of Europe. But Arizona took a Russian, but not Matvei Michkov. He goes to Philadelphia. I guess fingers crossed that he plays out that 3-year deal with SKA St. Petersburg of the KHL. And obviously there is some geopolitical issues to sort out there as well. But he has all the makings of an absolute stud, a potentially pivotal point in Flyers franchise history. And I think that, like, we don't want to see the Flyers do good, but I think you and I can both agree, Garrett, that when the Flyers are good, that rivalry feels a little bit like a real rivalry rather than the Flyers being kind of at the bottom feeder these last couple of years. I think that we both can agree that that rivalry is more fun when both teams are good.
I immediately, as soon as you said that, I immediately thought back to the pictures in my head of the 2012 playoff series. And although that did not obviously end well for the Penguins, but those teams were very much deserving of the position that they were in that postseason. Claude Giroux, Sidney Crosby rivalry, the passing of the baton, how infamous that became on social media. Yes, I agree. I love beating the Philadelphia Flyers by 7-2 every night. And I will, for as long as I live, I will gladly beat the living bejesus out of the Flyers for as long as we can. But, you know, the Flyers are going to be very openly entering this rebuild with a lot of new faces in that front office. New general manager Danny Briere, former Flyer, really spearheading that charge along with President Keith Jones. He was a former Flyer at one point, turned into a broadcaster. Now he's in the front office again. But yeah, we see the Flyers and the Penguins. The Flyers are embracing the rebuild and looking to get younger. They know these next 3 years with Michkov in Russia and very likely possibly not coming over until that 3-year contract is fully complete, given the geopolitical situation that you mentioned with the war in Ukraine right now. So we know the Flyers are going to be bad in the short term. 3 years from now, will the Penguins be entering a rebuild 3 or 4 years from now, whereas 3 or 4 years from now, the Flyers could be coming out of their rebuild, and it could be a switch of fortunes in the Metropolitan Division. We'll see. Obviously, it's going to take a few years for us to get a clearer picture and a fuller grasp of what new president of hockey operations, Kyle Dubas, wants to do. But yeah, absolutely, I agree with you. The better the Capitals are, better the Flyers are. Those are the Penguins' two main rivals. The better they are, the better hockey it creates. And as we sit here and wait for pick number 14, I'm filled with cautious optimism because, Robbie, it feels like we finally have a guy in Kyle Dubas who knows what he wants to do. He knows the way he wants to go about accomplishing his goals using data and analytics. And looking at the draft board right now, seeing some of the big names who are still on the board, It has me excited. The Penguins have not picked as of 8:35 Eastern time, but they are going to be on the clock right after the Buffalo Sabres. Buffalo Sabres are on the clock right now as we wait, Robbie. But yeah, this is going to be a pivotal time. You mentioned it. It's going to be a franchise-altering time for the Flyers, but also this is going to be a franchise-altering time for the Penguins as now we get into the meat and potatoes of the NHL offseason.
A lot's going to happen in these next few days starting tonight, and it already has started for the Penguins and a few other teams. I mean, the Reilly Smith trade was a significant move. I mean, it wasn't a bottom six move. That is a top six move with the idea that they know Jason Zucker has likely priced himself out of Pittsburgh, and that is, hey, that's business, and that's completely fine. And Jason Zucker is going to be missed in Pittsburgh either way, but I am thrilled with Reilly Smith in Pittsburgh. And a tweet that I saw come across my feed when the Reilly Smith trade was made it's from Vinny Batts at Vinny Batts. The promising thing about the Smith trade is that it clearly shows some semblance of an actual logical plan from the front office. And then in quotes, he said, "We think Zucker may be a risky long-term deal, so we'll target a similar production on a less risky contract." And I think that spells it out perfectly. We don't know exactly what Reilly Smith will do in Pittsburgh. Obviously, we'll find out in a couple months, but it shows that there is some kind of plan, not just in Kyle Dubas' head. He knows what he wants his team to be. He brought in a Mike Sullivan type player, a player with experience, a player at pedigree, a player that can produce at or near the level of Jason Zucker. And that is exactly what the Penguins need leading this ship right now. And it really seems like the fortunes have shifted. The winds have shifted in Pittsburgh. I believe Buffalo just picked one of the guys that the Penguins were possibly targeting, but that's neither here nor there. But the Penguins are now on the clock. But it's so fresh to see a front office with an actual vision and a plan leading these Pittsburgh Penguins.
So, Robbie, you did mention it. The Buffalo Sabres, the pick is in. They take Zach Benson, a left winger, out of the WHL, a winger that we had briefly talked about, again, not with super in-depth prospect analysis, but one of the players that could have been there. I believe that's Sam Ventura's territory, former front office member of the Pittsburgh Penguins, now in Buffalo. 18-year-old Zach Benson from British Columbia, now going to the Buffalo Sabres. There are still some pretty solid names for the Penguins to pick. Players like Quentin Musty, Matthew Wood, Gabe Perreault, Oliver Moore. These are players that we briefly touched upon in some of the prior mailbag episodes that we've done. Really, I would be pretty satisfied with whoever the Penguins take at this point. If I had to give you a specific player I would want them to take, it would probably be Gabriel Perreault. I think looking at some of the analytics from some of the scouts and some of the people who put this kind of scouting content on hockey Twitter, Perreault certainly seems like he has the ability to become an impact top six forward. But yes, we are now waiting as we sit here 8:40 p.m. Eastern time, waiting for the Penguins to make their pick number 14, which is the highest first-round pick the Penguins have had since 2012. Yes, we wait and see what the pick will be.
And basically, whoever they pick here, assuming they don't go far off the board, will automatically become their best prospect in the system, which I know is not saying a lot, but this isn't just another draft. This draft is legitimately 20, 25 players deep at the very top for potentially getting a future superstar type player. And the Penguins have a great opportunity here, assuming they don't completely go crazy in the next 5 minutes and trade this pick, but it certainly seems like they're going to make the pick. So we will give our reaction as soon as they announce it.
Knock, knock, real estate pros. You could save up to 30% when you file your taxes with Block Advisors instead of a typical accountant. Block Advisors by H&R Block provides affordable tax expertise that finds every credit and deduction you deserve. 100% accuracy guaranteed. Visit blockadvisors.com/real estate today to get started. Average savings based on national average fees for Federal Form 1040, plus Schedule C and one state filing in the latest available 2020 survey conducted by the National Society of Accountants. Pricing may vary. See blockadvisors.com/guarantees for full details.
All right, so the pick is in, and the Penguins take forward centerman Brayden Yager from Moose Jaw in the WHL.
Pretty much whoever the Penguins picked filled a need within the organization because that draft pool, that talent pool is so depleted. So he basically jumps to the top of their prospect pool. So you'll be hearing a lot about him here in the coming days and weeks as he'll be at the prospect camp in July. I'm almost sure of it, but again, not a guy that's going to be in the NHL within the next 2 or 3 years. This is all building for the future. And so it seems like early returns from people that study it are a little shocked. He kind of went off the board, but I think overall, he definitely jumps to the top of the Penguins prospect board. Patrick Bacon, who does player cards, Brayden Yager ranked 24th overall. He said Yager's scored at a solid but not elite rates in the Western Hockey League over the past couple of years. He's a very valuable prospect, but feels like a bit of a reach compared to the level of other players that were available. So take that as you will.
Jesse Marshall has tweeted. He has given some early analysis on the Yager pick. He says, quote, Yager has lots of talent offensively. He has a little ways to go on defense, and I don't think his movement away from the puck is good enough just yet. Jesse says we'll spend a lot of time talking about the deep offensive toolbox. There's lots to like there. And Jesse claims that Yager could be potentially the third best shooter in this draft class. So one of the things I was reading that Yager may have been something of a reach at 14, but he does have an NHL ready shot, and his shot could be the best asset he has at his current level right now at just 18 years old.
Yeah, so obviously a lot of development coming, and basically unless the Penguins traded this pick, more than likely, unless one of those four guys like Michkov or Fantilli or Carlson fell to the Penguins, they weren't going to be in the NHL anytime soon. So we'll hear more obviously in the coming days, but Brayden Yager is the selection for the Penguins. They now do not have a selection until the third round, which will be sometime tomorrow afternoon. Thursday, June 29th, we are recording this in the evening of Wednesday, June 28th. There are only one round tonight. The other 6 rounds are tomorrow. The Penguins will have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 picks tomorrow. The third round, the fifth round, the sixth round, and then a pair in the 7th round. So I don't know about you, Garrett, but I don't have too much to say on Brayden Yager. That is the selection. He is a center. Obviously, is probably going to be the Penguins' best prospect right now, simply because that again, this is a deep draft, but simply because that prospect pool is so depleted. So any help the Penguins can get, I'd say you kind of take it and accept it right now.
You could have absolutely made the argument that they could have traded this pick for help in the immediate future alongside Crosby and Malkin. And you would have been well justified in your reasoning to think that way, to trade the pick. This is a player in Yager, while the immediate returns are not overly promising from the likes of some of the scouts on social media, this is a pick that is not meant for the short term. This is a player that's not going to be in the NHL probably at least for another 2 to 3 seasons. And by that time, everyone keeps saying that by that time, the window will have likely shut. The championship window will have likely shut, and the Penguins can then start looking to build for a future without Crosby and Malkin. But this is a player, like you said, Robbie, who immediately vaults to really the top of the Penguins' very, very, very shallow prospect pool alongside defenseman Owen Pickering from last year. I definitely get the sense on social media, Robbie, that a player like Gabe Perreault or Matthew Wood, there were people I follow on Twitter in my Twitter circle that are definitely perplexed and questioning the decision of Kyle Dubas. But it's hard to, at the same time, you could definitely have made the argument for Perreault. And again, you would have been well justified in doing that as well. But for me, I'm not going to judge an 18-year-old who's probably 2 or 3 years away from making his NHL debut, as are a lot of these players at this point in the draft. Once you got out of the top 5 to 7 players, really, those impact forwards who could come in at 18, 19 years old, a lot of these players are going to have to take time to develop either in their junior leagues, in college, in their European leagues before they come over either into the AHL or the NHL. So it is what it is now. The Penguins, you cannot change history. Brayden Yager is a member of the Pittsburgh Penguins. He is their 14th overall selection in the first round of the 2023 NHL Draft. And Robbie, unless you have any other thoughts on Yager and where the Penguins stand, as you mentioned it, they will not pick again unless a trade is made, in which case we will keep you notified of that. But they will most likely not pick again until sometime tomorrow afternoon. In the meantime, however, we do have a couple of questions, and we'll make this into sort of a very, very small mailbag because we have a couple of questions that were submitted through Twitter, thanks to Woody, who was a new question asker on this week's most recent Penscast mailbag. And Robbie, we'll basically be doing this live. He has about 4 or 5 questions. And we'll start off with you and go back and forth like we usually do, and we'll just give our instant analysis to these questions that Woody has for us. Question number 1 from Woody: if Kyle Dubas brings in a general manager, do you believe that he would give the general manager the green light to fire Mike Sullivan and the coaching staff and bring in his own coach and his own coaching staff?
Not anytime in the near future. I think about that, and I really get the feeling that after what we've heard since Dubas got hired, that Mike Sullivan's leash, which I thought was going to be very short when the season started, I think it's longer than what people believe right now. I think Mike Sullivan has assuming they don't start the year like 0-10 or something like that, I really think he has a much longer leash than what he did at the end of the season, and I think it's significantly longer. They seem to be working well together, and I'm pretty sure, again, Dubas is going to be one that makes all the final decisions. I don't think Dubas wants his team to reflect him, and the general manager would still have to answer to Kyle Dubas. So I don't think that any general manager that comes in will have any kind of leeway over the coaching staff. And if he wants to put his input in, then he thinks that they should move on. I'm sure that Kyle Dubas will listen, but I think at the end of the day, it is Dubas' call, and I don't see in any circumstance anytime soon that Mike Sullivan is on his way out of Pittsburgh with everything we've heard with how he's been working with Dubas and their rapport with each other. How do we feel about Max Domi as a potential free agent? He is, at this time, only 28 years old, and someone that, has been mentioned with the Penguins in the past.
Yeah, there is a sort of familial connection through Mario Lemieux to the Domi family and Ty Domi, Max's father. If you're a new listener to the Penscast and the Penscast mailbag, Brian and I, who is a frequent question asker, Brian and myself, we're trying to manifest both Jordan Staal and Max Domi to come to Pittsburgh. I would absolutely be in favor of bringing in a 28-year-old impact forward like Domi. He would definitely be a boost to that top 9. He could slot into the top 6 if injury dictated. Let me pull up some of Domi's stats right here. So he was traded to the Dallas Stars at the deadline. He started the season with the Chicago Blackhawks. In 80 games this season, he scored 20 goals, 36 assists, 56 points. So you're getting that 20 to 25 goal, 50 to 60 point. That's going to be definitely top 6 production across the NHL. I do wonder if Domi, since he is an unrestricted free agent, I wonder if either one of his current teams, either the Dallas Stars or the Chicago Blackhawks, I wonder now with Connor Bedard officially being a member of the Blackhawks if the Blackhawks try and make a run at Domi once again. But he will enter unrestricted free agency, assuming he doesn't sign an extension with the Dallas Stars. And I would be in favor of bringing in a player of Domi's stature. 5'10", 194 pounds. He's not the biggest forward, but at the same time, he plays the game with a lot of grit and sandpaper. Career numbers, he has played 581 games, 121 goals, 370 career points in almost 600 career NHL games. Certainly a player who is no stranger to producing offense. And I would absolutely not be opposed to bringing in a player like Max Domi. Let's see here. We'll go to another question here. Robbie, would it be smart to sign goaltender Semyon Varlamov if the price was right, just as sort of a stopgap player until the Penguins can develop a younger goaltender?
I'm not really sold on that. I think there's other ways that the Penguins can improve the goaltending position without dipping into veterans that old. Again, Varlamov has been around since I believe he was a rookie in the 2008-2009 season. So not really a young buck anymore. I think there's other options that they can explore that would be perhaps a little bit better. He hasn't been the same goalie as he was a couple years ago when he was teaming up with Ilya Sorokin on Long Island to win the Jennings Award as the best goaltending tandem. I think there's better options than Semyon Varlamov. I mean, you never say never because it could always come down to need. And if the need's there and the willingness is there from both sides, it can always happen. But overall, I'm not really a fan of that move unless it would be out of necessity, just simply because I think there are better options. Woody, this is the fourth one he asked here. Would you be in favor of signing JT Compher, a pending free agent, as our fourth line center?
Yeah, another player, not much in the same vein as Max Domi, but again, another player that I would absolutely love to bring into the bottom six. In 82 games this season, Compher scored 17 goals, 35 assists, good for 52 points, and it was a +8 in 423 career games. Compher has scored 88 goals and accrued 194 points. He has spent his entire career with the Colorado Avalanche, and again is set to be an unrestricted free agent, only 27 years old, so still very much in his athletic prime as a forward in the NHL. Another solid player who would do wonders to improve what was a very stagnant, dry, unimpressive bottom six for the Penguins last season. So I don't think Compher is going to command a ton of money on the open market given the role that he's been in. This, I believe, was a career season for Compher in terms of point total. Yes, 52 points this year. His second highest career point total was just last season with Colorado. In 70 games played in the 2021-22 season, he had scored 18 goals, 15 assists for 33 points. So a noticeable uptick in production. However, with 52 points being the benchmark now in your career at 27 years old, that's pretty much top 9, bottom 6 level production. And with those bottom 6 kind of players, you're not obviously going to command as much money as you would your superstars on the open market, your elite forward, top 6 forwards or defensemen. So Compher absolutely would get my vote along with Max Domi if they were signed on cheap 1 or 2 year deals. I have the feeling that's what Kyle Dubas wants to do, bring in players on the open market to very cheap 1 to 2 year deals with not a lot of term, not a lot of impact on the salary cap with where the Penguins are. They have about, even with the Reilly Smith trade now, they'll have about $15 to $16-ish million in salary cap, I do believe, to try and figure out if they want to re-sign the likes of Tristan Jarry, Brian Dumoulin, and any of the other unrestricted or restricted free agents that they have on their roster as well before we get to Saturday, July 1st, which is the start of unrestricted free agency. I believe this is the last question from Woody as we close out this sort of mini mailbag. This is a question from Woody, and it's a good question because even as a young person, I'm younger than you, Robbie. I did not watch Barrasso play in his prime with the 91-92 Penguins, but if Tom Barrasso had been more friendly to the media, do you believe Barrasso gets into the Hall of Fame sooner, because Barrasso has had a notoriously frosty relationship with members of the local media, the national media, and many, many people believe that that has impacted the weight that Barrasso had to endure to get into the Hockey Hall of Fame.
I definitely think that's a very legitimate thing to bring up, because Barrasso was extremely, extremely cold toward the media, almost famously cold toward the media his entire career. And you kind of read about some of what led to that, what kind of things that happened. And it's unfortunate it played out like that, but I definitely think that could have played a role in his delayed induction in the Hall of Fame. And there was kind of I don't want to say it wasn't a freeze on goaltenders. It just seemed like there was a while that the goaltenders weren't getting elected to the Hall of Fame. And some people did openly discuss that. And I definitely think that played a part into, at the very least, Mike Vernon and Tom Barrasso being elected this year. Barrasso, I mean, he does have a Vezina, 2 Stanley Cups, finalist for a Vezina 5 times, over 300 wins, which I know, again, aren't the end-all, be-all of goalie stats. But I mean, for his era, you have to put him into you have to kind of look at him in the era he was into. He wasn't like a butterfly goaltender. He was there before Brodeur really kind of changed the game that way, and the way that Waugh did. Now, Waugh was obviously a little bit before him, but he was more of a stand-up goaltender. He wasn't a pure butterfly goaltender. And if you kind of, again, guys like Brodeur and Waugh that played at the same time he did, justly in the Hall of Fame, no doubt about that. And Barrasso, again, and he also had the benefit of play, or I guess it wasn't a benefit, but one thing that may have been held against him was he was playing on a team that had like 8 other Hall of Famers on it. So I definitely think that hurts as well. But when the media is the one voting on putting you in the Hall of Fame, and you are famously, we'll just call rude toward that block, it's definitely not helping your odds, let's put it that way. But that's neither here nor there at this point. I'm sure he's more than happy to have gotten the call, regardless of how long it took or how long he thinks it deserved to take, or whatever the case. But and I definitely think that's a completely valid point to bring up, his treatment of the media and his long wait to get into the Hall of Fame.
And of course, as we sit here earlier in the day, as we start to put a bow on this episode of the Penscast, again, if you're just listening to this and just seeing the news somehow, Reilly Smith has been traded from the Vegas Golden Knights to the Pittsburgh Penguins in exchange for a 2024 third-round pick. So the Kyle Dubas era has officially begun. You could argue that the Reilly Smith trade was the opening salvo to the Kyle Dubas era here in Pittsburgh, but with the Penguins making their first-round selection tonight, they will be back in action. Like Robbie mentioned earlier, the Penguins will be back in action tomorrow, June 29th, sometime in the early afternoon, as the NHL gets rounds 2 through 7 done in the annual NHL entry draft. And then all eyes turn to the start of unrestricted free agency on Saturday, July 1st. And if the Penguins are active on free agency or around free agency within the first couple of days, we will definitely be here at the Skating Penguin Network to break down any and all transactions made, as the Penguins now are under the command of Kyle Dubas. Robbie, do you have anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up this sort of instant analysis edition of the Penscast?
Nope, I don't really have anything else. Fun time, and I guess we'll see y'all next week. With guessing we're gonna have a bunch of news the next time we sit down to talk.
Yeah, I do imagine, because we would typically record the mailbag on Mondays, and I would imagine by Monday the immediate rush of free agency would have started to die down. A lot of those big name moves are made within like the first 48 to 72 hours. So maybe we do a little bit of, maybe we combine the mailbag and the news into one big episode next week, and we put it out on Tuesday. Maybe we'll sit down and coordinate that. But Until then, I have been Garrett Bahana for Robbie Noggle. Thank you for listening to this instant reaction, instant analysis edition of the Penscast as Kyle Dubas and the Penguins make their first round selection. Brayden Yager is now the newest member of the Pittsburgh Penguins, as is NHL forward Reilly Smith coming over from the Vegas Golden Knights. Stay with us here at the Skating Penguin Network and at Fans First Sports Network to bring you all the latest news and notes around the Penguins and the NHL. So for Robbie Noggle, I have been Garrett Bahana. Thank you so much for listening to this edition of the Penscast, and we will talk to all of you again very soon.